So you can imagine you're figuring out all of this stuff, and then you read it back and you go, I hate it. Because it's everything I didn't want it to be. It was a management consulting book, right?
Right.
And then human in here, it was just me trying to sound academic, which I'm clearly never. So then it was
too technical.
It's too technical, right? I believe the stories because it's something that's ingrained in us that's been handed down from generation to generation.
So they've actually done brain scans.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is if somebody's talking to you and you're listening, there's two little parts of your brain that are engaged. Rest of it's just sitting there. Two tiny little.
So how we got here and some of the opportunities that we had to take a different path with the technology. And by the way, this is no blame on anybody, because this is a bit like the suitcase that every generation carries from the past and doesn't know any different. So this is not me blaming big tech or blaming any other institution, because in a way they were handed some luggage from some invisible person from 20 years ago, and they don't know any different either. He believes the dream is about fixing the tragedy that happened to him, where he realizes the dream is actually for all of us. And as a hero, he's actually fighting for all of us, and that dream wasn't for him. He was just the person carrying it.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Michael Clark, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about Our Moment. Our Moment is a book that you've written and published that I believe is going to be something that the world needs to take notice of. And I cannot thank you enough for being here today.
No, I'm super excited. This is going to be fun.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for being here. And by the way, just for record, you've got Mark Victor Hansen right after this. Tell him I said hi. He's one of my favorite people. He and Crystal, as I told you before, have been on the podcast, and we had a great time. We really had a lot of fun. So where were you born?
So I was born in a very small, place called Church Village, which is in Wales. I lived in a very small town up until about the age of 30, which we'll get into. Yeah. And only 3,000 people live there. Wow. So I was literally born in a place where everybody knows who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like a Cheers rerun, right? So, So what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
Do you know, it's funny. So when I was younger, my mum taught me to read.
Yeah.
So it's really funny. I look back on my life, and I don't really, in the moment, you don't think about these things. It's only when you join the dots, when someone famous said, right, you only join the dots looking backwards, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, my mum taught me to read when I was 2 years old.
Wow.
And I was taught to read stories. She read me everything, like literally every possible book, newspaper. So that's a long memory. And I think one of the other memories I hold dear is just friendship, right? Yeah. Around friends who are still friends with me today. Like I've known people since the age of 1, 2 years old, and we're still in WhatsApp groups. We played sport together until we were 20, where most people were out drinking. We were playing football and various things. So I feel really blessed that in a strange way, I remember the world before the internet, showing my age. Yeah. So I got to experience what it was like to hold on to genuine relationships and play sport and just be in nature. But also enjoy the simple things in my life. And I think reading and the power of story was a huge part of growing up.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite sport growing up?
Oh yeah. So football was my favorite sport, which you guys would know as soccer.
Right.
That kind of never left me. Once I realized I was never going to be a footballer, which was probably around begrudging me about the age of 18. My friends would probably tell me it was about 14, but I'm not having that. So that was my favorite. But I was lucky. All my friends were very sporty. So we played everything. We played cricket, we played tennis, we played soccer, we played everything.
Cool.
And it was, my summers are littered with stories of just endlessly playing sports in the field with my friends, or never coming in until like 10, 11 o'clock because I was always out doing a sporting activity. So
Yeah, that's cool, man. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
oh, that's easy. My grandfather.
Yeah.
That's really easy. I was super lucky that I didn't go on holiday abroad until I was like 20.
Hmm.
Um, and most of my friends were like, you're crazy. And I was like, no, I had the best childhood you can imagine. Like my parents would go and visit my mum's mum and dad in the north of England.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather, coolest guy ever. Like he would take me for walking. He knitted his own socks. He used to go looking for lead, so the fishing leads that fishermen used to use.
Mm-hmm.
He used to collect them in bags that he made himself to melt down into bullion and then sell to scrap merchants. But he had so many stories.
Yeah.
Like he was a trawlerman. He was like a master welder. So it was like I had so much fun and so many memories that like that, you know, that man was probably, other than my father, one of my first heroes in a way, because he was such a varied character. And I just used to massively look forward to going on holiday. I'm sure obviously afterwards I enjoyed traveling and exploring new countries, but those formative years when you're evolving as a child and you wanting someone to look up to, I think, you know, that's a lasting memory.
Yeah, that's cool. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
But I turned up, I guess. So I was never a fan of school, I have to be honest. I'm sure my friends find it hilarious I've written a book. But no, I never really turned up. And that was really because I think probably everybody has a story where they were bullied or they just didn't fit in.
Yeah.
And that was really my narrative. I did love English, even though, you know, it's really funny. Like I didn't really do that great in English at the time, even though I was reading classics when I was like 14 years old in my own time. But not really. Like English was the only memorable subject for me, because I think, again, unknowing to me, the power of story was touching me from a young age, and it was always the subject that drew me in, and I was always in the library, weirdly. So, but school is not on my top list, I think.
So after high school, where do you go?
Oh, this is where the journey gets interesting. So I told you about, so I think I told you about this when we spoke last time.
Yeah.
So I think that every journey has a catalyst moment, right?
Mhm.
So I went back to school for like 2 years because the people who bullied me left.
Oh.
And I taught myself, I told myself that I would go back and pass some exams. And I managed to pull that off and got myself into a technical college, or a college as we would know it. So I have my only qualification in life, which is a very box standard computer science qualification, which was like 12 months of my life. I then I spent a year in, which would be a university, I guess, studying computer science, and I got bored then and just dropped out. There was a moment though between that where I don't know what the equivalent is in the US, but SAT scores, I guess, which is like my GCSEs, and I bombed them completely because I never went. My mum told me I would never be anything in my life, which I know she didn't mean it. It was just an emotional response, but it was a catalyst that probably changed my life. Because deep inside, it was probably something I needed to hear, but probably not in the way that she intended. It actually gave me personally a catalyst to almost say, I'll show you. And I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah.
And it was the driving force that made me who I am, I guess.
Tell me I can't do something right.
Yeah. And in between that, there's obviously a personal story. Like, I'm not sure if I told you. When I was 14, I had epilepsy.
No.
So my first recognition at 14 was like me being me in the wrong class completely. And then waking up 24 hours later in hospital, having to have a seizure in my school uniform with a flashlight in my face was like, okay, this is interesting. Is this what death is? So my friends were amazing. Like my friends rallied around me, and I'm grateful for that. But on top of that, I had to deal with an illness and, being told you wouldn't be anything. And, what transpired out of that was truly amazing in terms of, I don't look back on my life very often, this is why it's a good and interesting discussion for me, because it shows me, I guess, how far I've come, but hopefully gives people a sense of, if you put your mind to it, you can be truly anything you want to be.
That's exactly why we do this podcast. Because everybody that's on here has accomplished something, right?
Yeah.
And they all have a circuitous route in terms of how they got there, right? And it's never like a straight line.
Oh no,
you know what I mean? It's like, it's just right. It's like following a river, it's just, so yeah, it's cool. So having epilepsy,
yeah,
and trying to go to high school, I mean, it's an interesting age to be, right? And one of the things that I know from sort of friends of the family that have had epilepsy is there's really, the doctors are always guessing. They're not sure quite how much to give you or how much not to, what drugs to, you know what I mean? So it's kind of this hit and miss thing. How long did it take them to dial in the medication that you needed?
So if I'm being truly honest, the medication they put me on wouldn't have done anything.
Really?
So basically, it was such a low dose that they said, look, if you're going to have one, we can't stop it, unfortunately. What was interesting was at the same time, so annoyingly, I had it at an age where all young people are learning to drive, and I couldn't drive for 5 years. So it was like you're completely, dating was interesting because all girls would say, have you got a car? And he's like, I've got no car. So that was kind of out, right? But about 19, I discovered the gym and nutrition. So one common thread in my life, which I know we'll dig into, is self-teaching, right? And being able to join the dots on things that I learned. And through my passion of learning nutrition and food, I cured epilepsy at the age of 19, 20. So I ended up going to the doctors and they said, we have no idea what you're doing, but keep doing it. So in a way, I cured it myself, but I also figured out what the trigger was. So most people think, well, epilepsy is caused by different things. Some people it's light, flashing light, sounds. With me, it's lack of sleep. So the longer I go sleep deprived, it's almost like it causes a switch in my brain to malfunction. And it's very rare that you feel like it's happening, but then you can't stop it. And they were very big ones. Like I almost died 2 or 3 times. So these are really massive ones. But yeah, no, I was really, really lucky. But I think that unknowingly or knowingly taking that health conscious path of longevity as well saved me many times in my life, not just in that moment at 19 or 20. But yeah, the doctors were completely bamboozled how I'd fixed it.
Okay, so $64,000 question. You use diet and exercise to fix epilepsy?
Yeah.
Can you be a little more specific?
So when I was 19, I'm an all or nothing guy, right? So this was back in the day when you read about bodybuilding in magazines, and you read that, obviously you learn this as you get older, that it's all a bit false. I can be this big if you take this protein powder isn't really true at a certain point. But the diets were there to be read. So when I was 19, I decided, right, okay, I'm going to do everything they say. And if it doesn't work, then I can't look back when I'm 90 and say, I wish I'd done this,
right,
or I wish I did that. So, but I did it in a way unknown to me that was probably what we now know to be longevity today. So I gave up everything that was bad for me in one day. Crisps, chocolate, soft drinks, alcohol. I never drank anyway because of epilepsy.
Right.
And I started eating whole foods, like vegetables, green vegetables. Unknown to me, they were low inflammation vegetables for my stomach. I followed, the advice and the training and everything else. And lo and behold, in 18 months, 21 months, it had all gone. Um, and I haven't really, all that's changed in my life as I've got older is obviously science has evolved, so I can invent new supplements. But at the same time, then I've adjusted the food as my body's evolved. So I've constantly adjusted the diet to reflect how I'm aging. So yeah, it's just been that's a common thread in my life as well. Is like the love of nutrition and the love of sport. In a sense, has been a bit of like meditation for me as well. Those mornings where you can work out, and it's probably the only moment in your day where you can literally tune out, and it's just kind of you and working out and maybe competing against yourself, which again is probably a common thread.
It is with you, guaranteed, right? So, and we'll get into that. So what is your workout like? We know what your diet was like. What was your workout like?
So I trained 5 days a week, 2 days off. I got I got quite big quite quickly. So genetically, I was made for bodybuilding. I went from a skinny guy to quite muscular quite quickly. So I was primarily weights based, and HIIT and cardio. So I did a mixture of both. I went through phases of like doing lots of running because I was naturally a sprinter almost. I could never do really long distance, but I had the ability to put muscle on quickly. So I got into the weights culture. I have to admit, in the first 2-3 years, it was me versus the weights, right?
Yeah.
It was going to the gym out of hate because of bullying, and it was a release. What was interesting as I got older, I got into it because I loved it. It was a complete light switch moment. I no longer am battling demons from the past. I actually love doing this, and it's giving me a sense of peace for like 2 hours or an hour and a half of my life. And the dietary component then didn't become for the gym; it just became a lifestyle. It's like I don't understand when people ask me like, what do you have for breakfast, lunch, or dinner? It's like, well, it depends. Is it meal 1 or meal 3? I've still got I got 2 coaches today, whereas back in the day it was just me. But that's the biggest evolution, is also getting advice from other people who may know more than I do. But yeah, it hasn't left me. In what I am now going to be 50 next year. Apparently my biological age is like 38 or whatever, which is cool. Not that I'm counting, but I don't think I've missed a meal since I was 19 years old in my diet. It's just become like a metronome, and I love what I eat, and I constantly change it and stick to things. I'm a creature of habit as well, so I will stick to a diet for like 3 years and just adjust it. But the foods are good for me, so yeah.
That's cool. So you got into training, lifting, cardio, all that kind of stuff. You got into to training basically 5 days a week at the gym. And what was motivating you was the fact that you had been bullied.
I guess so. And I think if you meet, it's really interesting, right? If you meet to anybody who's into particularly weightlifting, either professionally or just does it as a hobby, there's always a trigger.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Like the average person who does cardio is there because they want to get fit or they want to lose weight. The people who go to the gym on the extreme end of it, there's always a story.
Yeah.
There's always a loss. There's always a trauma. You meet very few people who do it because they just love it. There's a very few. They do end up loving it, but that wasn't necessarily the trigger to go. The irony is, when I went, I was getting overweight because I stopped playing football. And I remember the day when someone large walked behind me and goes, actually, I'd kind of like to look like him. That would be great. And I was taught nutrition from day one, which was brilliant, because the foundation was always nutrition.
Yeah.
And being taught that in the beginning was great, because then I created a lifestyle in a way, and everything else just fitted around it.
I think if you looked into it, even the people that go there, that go to the gym that just run, they're right. They're trying to get into shape, but there's a story behind it. Every single person at the gym, I guarantee you, has some sort of a story, and they all have a particular motivation, right? And it could be they have a wedding coming up. It could be, whatever, right? It could be that they were diagnosed with something, or, and it's something that, what's interesting to me is I was bullied as a kid too. And I had an interesting moment. I was bullied by a kid that was bigger than me and all that kind of stuff, and lifted weights at home and all that kind of thing. And I had a moment a few years later where that same bully was walking down the street and took one look at me and recognized me, and he went across the street. He wasn't going to meet me on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Right? Which is probably wise. But it was one of those moments, right? Everybody that goes to the gym and does, and people that don't go to the gym that do things, they all have a story. They all have something that's gone on that drives them to do what they're doing. And it's interesting that bullying sent you there. Also, the epilepsy, right, sort of sent you there, and then you got to a place almost where you were kind of loving it and addicted to it to an extent, right? Where you didn't feel right if you didn't go. So I understand. I understand how you feel. So you discover the gym, you get into shape, you're built for bodybuilding, right? You're getting yoked, what we call yoked, the whole thing, right? And you went to university, you got bored, you left. Where'd you go after that?
So this is so fascinating when I think about this and I look back, because every job I did had a purpose.
Yeah.
It wasn't as if it was just random. And some of them were just the universe throwing it at me. And there's a third job which is like that. So the first job, I always joked, is the job my parents made me get because I had to earn some money and it was my keep, right? So I got a job in a telemarketing company. That was my first job. What was interesting, it wasn't B2C. So I wasn't selling to the end consumer. I was actually making appointments for salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
So looking back, it taught me to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole piece was ringing up senior people in businesses and making appointments for people to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really good at it. It was really easy. And ironically, by the time I left, I was building the databases that all the telemarketers were using, which was really funny. It was like, okay, fine, I'll just come in the morning and do this for you and do X, Y, Z. And I stayed there far too long because we were having way too much fun. Because people used to rotate all the time, but the four of us guys just stayed way too long. I think I always joked one day, if they paid us lots of money, we probably would have stayed. But it was fun. And so I did that for maybe 18 months or whatever it was. But I look back now and I think that was probably one of the first skills I actually learned without knowing it, which was the power of listening.
Mm-hmm.
But also the type of dialogue with senior people as well, of a certain standing. You don't really you took it for granted in the moment, obviously, because I was really young.
Mm-hmm.
But like looking back now, you pull on that thread quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
To have that exposure at such a young age is quite unique, I think.
It is, absolutely. So after university, where do you go?
So we did the telesales thing. I got another job.
So you went back to telemarketing, or were you still doing it?
Telemarketing after university, so that was my first job.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Second job then was something similar, so I don't really talk much about that because it wasn't really that interesting. But it's the third job that changed everything, changed my life. And it was by accident. So funny. So I remember sending my father down the local village to get a newspaper for me, and he brought the wrong one. And in that job section was this job advert for a software startup company in the capital city where I lived. It was like, okay. So I applied. And ironically, there was someone in the company I worked in at the time who'd also applied.
Oh.
So I got the job, and it was in their marketing department in telesales and so on. It was very fine. So I joined, and there was about 12 people who worked there. So it was like about $1 million turnover, I think. So they were an ERP software company. Basically, they sold like accounting software, linked into like manufacturing software bits and pieces. And I remember I'd been there for like about a year or so, a year and a half. And one of the consultants took me aside, and I was complaining because I wasn't being taught enough. But I'll come on to that in a second, because I learned another skill before this. So the two owners of the company, one of them was a trained accountant and a lawyer, and the other one was also just a trained accountant. So it was like, the joke was the managing director was the serious guy, the sales director with a co-founder was the less serious. But he used to take me with him on sales meetings, and he used to meet like C-level executives. And the way he used to sell was fascinating, because he used to just say, right, instead of, selling his product, he would say, tell me about your business. And of course, every senior person is obsessed with their business. And 5 seconds later, if it's a factory, you've got a hard hat on and you're being shown around. By the time we've left, he's already known and he sold it to them, because he's built again. So again, I learned the power of relationship and the power of listening. And then I was taking
questions.
Maybe, exactly, asking the right questions and just shutting up.
Yeah.
And then the third piece of the puzzle then was, I was complaining I wasn't being trained enough, or I wasn't being invested in as a good employee. And the one of the consultants took me aside and said, don't wait to be trained, train yourself. And
ooh, I like that.
That was the start and the end. So I used to come to work then 2 hours before everybody else and taught myself multiple programming languages and taught me everything you can think of. And fast forward another 14 months, I was a consultant in my mid-20s, advising some of the biggest companies in the world, taught myself one of the software products that they just acquired, and ended up implementing it for customers around the whole of the UK and Ireland, even building their version in my bedroom, because I was too busy doing it for clients. And eventually they sent me on a course for the software itself, but it was way too late. I passed it straight away because I've been doing it for all my clients. So in 4.5 years, I joined in marketing and I left as a consultant, but they were worth, when I left, maybe 12 million. And there was like about 50 to 60 employees, maybe more. So in a way, I'd gone from telesales to being able to do pre-sales, software implementations, migrations, training of salespeople and marketing people, all of that, in all of that time, because I trained myself. And I gave myself the power of learning. And what I was doing was, again, unknown to me, was I was building a toolbox of knowledge. But unlike most people, I was learning on how to execute knowledge, which was the most important gift, which was, someone said this to me recently, I'd learned how to learn, and I wasn't constrained by the education system. So the beauty of not going didn't constrain me and put me into my siloed thinking. It just literally just gave me the ability to just learn the things I wanted to learn. But the power was, I'd figured out how to turn knowledge into wisdom and almost build this toolbox. And that third job was the start of a set of principles I gave myself and a set of rules, which in the end served me pretty well, actually.
So you're at that company for 4.5 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then you leave. Where do you go?
So I was becoming a jack of all trades and a master of none in my head. Because if you imagine, I can do all of those things. And what does that mean as a job? Left. And when I left, it got really personal, because the irony was, the job I was doing is what I always asked them to do. And always wanted to do. And then it's almost like you be careful what you wish for. I kind of got it and I didn't really like it, or I didn't see it as my forever job. It's hard when you work for a startup from the early days, because they also look at you as family. So you never leave in a good way in the beginning. Some people will begrudgingly let you go. Some people won't. So found a job in a local authority. And it was, this is so funny because they obviously don't know this. So the job was two purposes. So the first was I would manage a software team to effectively migrate onto a web-based version of their payroll system. But the other hat I wore was I was the single person for the company to re-engineer the organization in the public sector. What they didn't know is I taught myself flowcharting 2 days before I went to the interview. And then during the interview on the weekend, then I did everything that they wanted in the test, and they thought it was amazing in the interview. They'd never seen anything like it, and I got the job. So again, this was part of one of my existing rules was 80-20, right? So, well, I can do like 80% of what they want. The rest, I'll just figure it out. You were taking calculated risks. So yeah, I did that job again for, I don't know, I think about 15, 16 months because I got a bit bored because it was a bit slow. Public sector, it was a tick in the box. I did it. But again, it showed me the power of learning and applying. I learned something in a textbook over the weekend, drew it all up, and I came to work and they looked at me like an expert, but probably they knew more than I did, right?
So there's a recurring theme here. Do you bore easily?
Oh God, yeah. I went for an interview in Microsoft in Redmond. I'll always remember this. I had 8 interviews in 24 hours, or whatever it was.
Wow.
And my boss at the time, I remember we were having lunch in the canteen. He goes, "I'm a bit worried because I think you're going to get bored really fast." I was like, this is Microsoft. It's like, you can't be telling me I'm going to be bored. And the job was a big deal. So yeah, it does happen quite a lot. I have this brain tick box. It's like almost once I know how to do it and I've done it, I'm kind of ready to move on to the next thing.
On to the next. So you're at that company for 15, 16 months and you end up getting bored. And what do you do after that?
So I can't remember how I found the job. So there was a job advertised in General Motors Financial Services. It's a big deal. So it was to manage the whole change function for the UK and Ireland, for every dealership for General Motors, including all the back office systems. So the things and the dealer system. So when you go in and buy a car, it was all of those systems. It was the underwriting that made sure you had enough credit to buy the car or to finance it, and all the systems and all the accounting and everything else. And I remember the interview really well because they were concerned that I'd never worked in financial services before. And I ticked all the boxes for them and they're like, we're not sure. And I said, oh yeah, don't worry, then just pay me what I did in my last job. And if I prove myself, then you can just pay me the salary. Right? And they loved that answer. And we went, okay, fine. It was nothing for them to lose. I think it was like 6,000 less than I wanted. And their job was advertised. And I remember him saying to me, like, oh, we've got this small project going on as well. It was like, that was him lying to me because that project was absolutely huge. That was changing imagine changing the entire business's software in a year. And that's what we did. We changed every dealership in the UK and Ireland software, all the back office, all the accounting system. And we were the first country in the world to do it on time to budget for that software release. And I did some things in that team. Like I don't even ever manage a team once. They didn't know that. But I did things in that team, which looking back were completely the right things to do. They were intuitive. So for example, for the first week, I ignored everybody in my team. And there was a reason for that, because in front of me where we sat was the whole business. And the business technically were my customers because we did work for them. If there was an issue, we managed all the processes, right? So I actually went to my customers before I sat down with my team because I wanted to know what my customers thought of my employees. What are things that we could do better that we're not doing? What are things you like what we do? And so on. So I learned a few things from them. One of the things was, look, we don't mind you being late doing stuff for us, but don't tell us last minute. Okay, that's good. And then I started observing the people in the team, what they then did for those people. And it turns out some people were doing the wrong jobs and some people were more intelligent than others, but they were doing the wrong job. So I rotated. So I rotated people, and eventually I got some people doing jobs that were taking almost a month down to a morning because the wrong person was doing the job because they weren't technical enough.
Yeah. And they were struggling.
Yeah. So I used my listening skills to understand the consumer, which in this case was the people in the business. So anyway, after fast forward 3 months, they increased my salary pretty much. back to what it should have been. And I mentioned the rules, right? That job was, so once I started learning in that software company I mentioned, I created almost 3 or 4 rules for myself. One of the rules would be I'd never move for money. I'd never change jobs for money. I would never work in the same industry twice. Obviously that changed as I got older. I would never do the same job twice. And that's true. And that's actually held pretty true. And I would always think 3 jobs ahead. And I always said to myself, I wouldn't know what the 3rd job was, but I would recognize it when I saw it.
Interesting.
So in a way, what I was really doing was building this toolbox of knowledge that I mentioned. And it would allow me to be ahead of my peers by decades almost, because I was, unknown to me, I was doing every job a company could offer.
Yeah.
I was doing it in a way that was unique, but allowed me to navigate things in a very different way. And I always said to myself then, it didn't matter what company you dropped me into. All I would need to understand is the context, and I would just pick the right tool out of the box to solve the problem. And that's what it was becoming. And then I said no to a lot of things during that time because I was offered new jobs. My dad thought I was crazy. My dad, by the way, is like, bless him, he's in his 80s now. He's now proud of me and understands and trusts my judgment. You can imagine in the early days, me hopping around and changing jobs for someone who'd worked in the same job all his life. Was like, when I left the software company, he said, well, if they offered you more money, you'd stay, right? I said, no, Dad. It's like my learning has stopped, and it just lost on him. Like, as I got older, it was like, okay, I trust you. So, but in between all of this, I was offered all these different jobs with lots of different money, sometimes a 20, 30,000 pay increase. But to me, they were me going sideways.
Right.
Or they were me doing the same thing just for more money. And it did. And one, it broke the rules. And 2, it just didn't interest me because, as we've already figured out, I get bored easily and I don't like doing the same thing. So I just kept on saying no until, lo and behold, as we'll get into, the 3rd job turned up on Friday afternoon.
So you're with General Motors. How long were you with General Motors Financial Services?
So this is where it gets interesting in my CV, because people don't believe I was able to do so much in a short period of time. So I was there, I think, just under 2 years. In that time, we implemented all of that software. I also started doing things in the business to understand it better so we could improve it strategically. I have this thing as well. When I used to work in corporate life, I used to email the person in charge, only so they knew who I was. I never wanted them to respond. It's just they knew my name and what I was trying to do. And one of the heads of strategy responded and came all the way from London to Wales, which is about 2 to 3 hours in a car, to see me for 10 minutes on his way to another meeting. And after that, 10 minutes later, I got an email sending me on a plane to re-engineer underwriting for all of Europe for General Motors. I even got invited to Paris to do what I did for the UK in Paris Bank for General Motors, and redesign Brazil while I was in my bedroom in Paris. And all of that in 2 years. And I was like, again, it was fun, and I did what I wanted to do. I, to this day, say the boss I had there was one of my best bosses, because he did invest in me. But he said something to me which no boss has ever said. He said, look, I know you're going to leave us, but we want to get the best from you while we have you. And if you leave to someone else, that's a reflection of what we did for you. And that's that. I've never heard anybody speak to me in those terms as a manager since, or as a leader. And again, that's a lesson for me, because that showed me what true leadership is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than necessarily some of the other leaders who showed me not how to lead. So yeah, I was there for just under 2 years. Again, I'm really sad to leave, because I made some really, deep relationships, got involved in lots of heavy projects. But yeah, it was the 3rd job came along, and I was old enough and stupid enough to say yes, because I kind of thought I was mature enough to do it at the age of 30 something.
So how did the 3rd job come along?
They called me. on a Friday, and I thought it was a joke. Because I just threw my CV. This was back in the day where you threw
Yeah.
your CV. People actually did look at it. It wasn't a machine, right? That evaluated you. So it was a Friday afternoon, and I got a voicemail. Actually, I missed the call. So and so, JP Morgan, and I was like, really? And I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a recruiter, but it was actually JP Morgan HR on a Friday afternoon. So I called them on Monday, and yeah, that was the third job.
So JP Morgan comes calling. How did they know who you were?
They found my CV, and I put some key terms in the CV, maybe which around what I was doing in my current job, and they wanted me to, I guess, set up an internal function that would improve the business, and change it. It was the first of its kind, I think, for the business as a whole. And the job was a contractor to permanent role. So it was low risk for them, high pay for me. So I just looked at it as a high paid probation job. The real big shift for me was it would require me to work in London. Now, I'd been offered London before, but I always thought I wasn't grown up enough or mature enough to do it. And I was like, well, if I'm going to do it now, I'm never going to do it if I don't do it.
Yeah.
So I did, yes. And I even moonlighted. And basically, I used to didn't tell my bosses, but I worked for free in the beginning. So I literally went to London, didn't tell anybody, recruited all my team, which were also consultants. And then when I was in Paris working on GMAC stuff, I was also having calls with JP Morgan US, kind of getting my feet wet before I got the job. But the third job ahead, I increased my salary by 100%.
Wow.
Because I wasn't thinking about moving for money. I never moved for money. So I always thought 3 jobs ahead. When the third job turned up, it could have been any company, quite frankly, not JP Morgan, but all the requirements of that job were exactly what I was looking for in the third job, because I'd met them all through the learning and the knowledge I was applying. Look, I used to take on projects in GMAC and not tell anybody. I'd read it on the train on the way in and said, oh, actually, I should try this. And luckily, my boss was like understanding and say, yeah, go on, give it a go. And I would just try it, because what's the worst that's going to happen? No one's going to die.
Yeah.
I might get fired, but it's fine. But it's a calculated risk. Like, I wouldn't take those risks today. But back then, I was driven by the dopamine effect of doing something new and learning something new and almost disproving what the author had written that I'd read. Because I learned very quickly that most books, particularly in the consulting world, are padded after the first couple of chapters, because the poor author committed to writing number of words and pages. And for me, it was like, okay, let's see if this person is telling the truth. But I would take what they said and I would combine it with maybe 15 things I already know. And I would come up with something new completely, but it would work. Okay, cool, this works. And I've solved the problem for the business. Everybody's happy. I've learned something new, and move on. So, yeah. But
So when you say GMAC, you mean General Motors Acceptance Corporation, which is their finance arm.
Auto finance.
Yeah. So, and then you keep mentioning this thing. I think you said CV.
Oh, yeah. So your resume, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure we're in 76 countries now worldwide. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure everybody was. What does CV stand for?
Curriculum vitae.
There you go. There you go. So basically a resume. Okay. So somehow JP Morgan saw your resume. Any idea how?
No idea. I think it was on a job site. I think they were hunting job sites. They found it, and I did my usual thing. So I go to London. I lived in the cheapest hotels for a very short period of time. They offered me a permanent job. I was so bad at negotiating salaries. I made up some rubbish excuse, got and I asked the question for like an extra £10,000, and the guy said yes in about 30 seconds. And I knew like I just undersold myself immediately, but it was fine. I had job security, and I did my usual then, started emailing people who were very senior and created stuff that didn't exist while I was there. And I remember being on a call with a guy from HSBC who just joined as a managing director in one of the senior functions. And I was showing him he said something. I said, "Oh, I've just done that." And he said, "Have you?" And so I started emailing him. And next thing I know, I'm on a plane to New York. And the funny thing is, my business unit used to pay me to go to New York, but really I was going to see him. And I'd worked for him. And in the end, he lifted me out and I worked across the whole bank. And I was there for about a long time, like for JP Morgan, lasting a long time. I was there like for 4.5 years.
Wow.
I was in New York like 4 times a year, like a guy. I used to laugh every morning I was in New York. I'm a guy from, every now and again you'd look up and you'd realize where you were and you'd be like, "My God, I work in New York.
Mhm.
Like I'm a guy from a town of 3,000 people. Like,
Mhm.
how did I end up here?" And you have these little moments. It's like when I worked in London, it was like, "Ooh, that's London Eye." You just realize like the gravity of where you work. But yeah, over the course of, again, 4.5 years, I ended up doing conferences for them. I think the funniest moment I've ever had, I cracked some things that were really important. That boss at the time got super excited. And we ended up going for a meeting. No, it was before this actually. I ended up going to Baltimore for a conference.
Mhm.
And my bosses at the time said, "Oh, look, we want you to meet someone really important, but we're not sure it's going to happen." So I went to the event in Baltimore and I said, "Look, can you come back?" Okay, fine. So I came back and I remember going into the elevator. I'm so naive. And I go into the elevator, and as the elevator got higher, the carpet got thicker and that little bit nicer, right? And I remember being taken into a room. It was like LA Law. I don't know if you're familiar with, like, the good old fashioned American series,
Mhm.
and overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. Most amazing view. Big oak dining table in the middle. Like I should have known this was someone important. So anyway, this woman comes in. She's really lovely. Um, Presented to her, and I learned something else in this meeting. Um, she turned to the guy next to her, who was like her assistant, and said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Oh, I'll have a look and I'll come back to you." In that moment, I knew who the decision maker was.
Mhm.
It wasn't her, it was him.
Mhm.
Anyway, I had no clue who she was. She was a very lovely lady, very polite. Turns out she was third in command of the whole bank.
Mhm.
And like, I'm glad I didn't know, because I kind of would have freaked out.
Yeah. You would have been nervous.
Yeah, exactly. But in those 4.5 years, I got to travel the world with JP Morgan, and I got to learn so many things in 4.5 years. But again, another catalyst moment there,
Yeah.
in terms of how that came to an end. But that was a fun time.
So you leave JP Morgan. Where do you go from there?
So this is where life got interesting. So no, it wasn't up until this point. So I actually got made redundant. So I got divorced at exactly the same time. So I had this mountain on top of me.
Mm.
Um, and it was funny actually because I was working for this other guy, I was super busy, but my business unit I was like a service that got revenue generated attached to me.
Mhm.
So everybody used to say to me, "Oh, you'll be fine," when they were going through the numbers, because we merged with 2 business units. And I got the letter to say my role was at risk and so on. And that's when the Microsoft role came about, because I
Mhm.
was actually, my former boss ended up working there, and my resume got top of the pile, and they invited me over, and they loved me. But at the time, this is before Obama, so pre him, the visa caps were quite low. I think when he came into office, he increased the H1B visa. So I think it was like 160,000 when he came in.
Mhm.
Um, I offered to work in the UK and commute like I did for JP, but they wanted me there. And it turns out I now know why, because the person who hired me left. So I was actually going to replace him. That's why I had so many interviews.
Wow.
So the role fell through. So I lost the job. My identity was gone, because you need to remember I was a vice president. I was living the life in New York, and kind of that's like rock bottom. And then I had adrenal fatigue for like best part of 3-4 years,
Mm.
um, which was very grounding,
Mhm.
because during that time I'd figured out a lot of stuff which got me notoriety in the design world,
Mhm.
particularly human-centric design. I'd connected the world of business to their world, which was obviously at the time very separate and distinct. As we know today, design now is very much part of technology and business, right? We're talking back in the day, this wasn't. I read a book by IDEO. I read it, said this is interesting, but it's rubbish because it doesn't mean anything in the business world.
Yeah.
So I connected both of those and wrote about it. And people loved it. I got asked to present at the Design Management Institute in Berlin. I was living the life, right? And suddenly a job comes crashing down, your life comes crashing down. And the only thing I had going for me was I knew, which was the gym again. But this time I went all in on that
Yeah.
and didn't focus on recovery and nutrition. And again, my body just burned out. And that was like I look back and I'm hugely grateful for that moment because in a way it shaped who I became.
Yeah.
But at the same time, all the things I'd learned about curing epilepsy were another vehicle to cure me again, in a way.
Wow. Wow. So that was 4 years?
Yeah, I think so. Like in the beginning, it started with like my thyroid going. So I God forbid if anybody ever gets an overactive thyroid. It's like the worst sweats you're ever going to get. Like you're literally waking up in a pool of your own sweat. And then I actually had a triple hernia and didn't realize it at the same time. So I tore my hernia in the gym. And then it progresses, right? Because once your adrenal gland starts to malfunction, all your other, it's almost like a domino effect. In your body, all these systems rely on each other. And then one isn't providing, the other one stalls, and then the other one stalls, and it's just cascades. So for me, my hair started to thin quite a bit because obviously the stress and everything else. I think the most painful thing was your eyes stop producing tear ducts, which is really strange. So you get not bleeding, but you get sores on your eyes because you obviously can't, when you blink, so you have to wear Vaseline when you go to bed. So in a way, what it did, it stripped everything back, right? So in the end, all you were was just a human being.
Yeah.
You weren't a reasonably good-looking man. There was nothing about you function because your hormones are crashed.
Right.
So there was nothing left. And it was actually quite cool looking back. The other thing is, of course, you have every symptom of cancer you can imagine. So, and all the doctors, bless them, like I had CT scans, I had MRIs, I had you name it, right? But in the end, it was a nutritionist who figured out what it was. I remember going into a shop and she said, I know exactly what it is. And then she dragged me around the shop and literally had a trolley full of supplements. And then me being me then, I started learning about different food combinations that would clean my liver, all these different food options and nutritional components. And after about 18 months to 2 years, I cured myself. But it took me all that time to find the right doctor. So I found an endocrinologist, which is basically the person that looks after all of this stuff in your body. And she said, well, I don't know what you've done, but you fixed it. But unfortunately, it's going to take 18 months to get back to where you were because that's how long it takes to heal. Because again, all those systems have to come back online and gradually come piece by piece. But I read a book in between all of that, many books, right? Like I always make the joke, I used to read 30 books a year. And it was never one genre, it was everything. And then the goal was really, can I connect these things and create new things? But I read a book called True North by Bill George. I don't remember anything in that book really, apart from this. There was a chapter around crucible moments. And he talked about that every human being in their life will have something happen to them, which he calls like a crucible moment. And the reason for that is because it's a crossroads in your life to decide how you want to learn from this experience and what it teaches you. And for me, it taught me how to be human. And it taught me that there was core values that I was missing that I didn't have. And because I didn't have them, those lack of core values were directing my life not in the right direction. So in a way, what came out the other side was the same guy who had all of those skills, but a different outlook on life with a different purpose, which made me even more powerful, I guess, because there was a humanity attached to it rather than an ego. And that's actually what died. I think in those 4 years, part of me died, but it was the part of me that wasn't the right part of me to take me forward to who I am today.
Yeah.
And that's why I look at those 3-4 years as a blessing. At the time, they were horrible, and you wish for something completely different. But looking back, it's actually shaped who I became, which is quite cool, actually.
Yeah. Well, I like who you became.
Yeah.
So,
It's not
right.
bad. It's not bad.
I'm in your corner. So we're going to take a real quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about your time at MasterCard, and we're also going to talk about this amazing book called Our Moment. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. We're back with Michael Clark, the author of Our Moment, and we're actually going to be reviewing that book here in a bit. But after that 4 years, so you had gone through what you called adrenal fatigue, basically, right? Which is and you had to basically completely reset in your life and sort of your outlook on life. And then after that 4 years, where do you go?
So I was really lucky, right? So when I came back from the US and didn't get the Microsoft job, I fell into consulting for like 6-7 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't work on, small projects. Like I worked on the Royal Mail privatization in the UK. So if you're familiar with the postal service in the UK,
Yeah.
they actually moved into a private company. So I worked on that strategy and other bits and pieces. That was really lovely. I worked for Lloyd's. And I worked for some big companies. But then I worked at Nationwide Building Society, which is like the world's biggest building society. I worked on some massive projects there, but it was the environment. The people were so lovely, and the culture was just perfect for me. It allowed me to heal, and then I had to leave because I couldn't stay there longer as a consultant because there were rules and so on. And then the MasterCard job came about again. This was back in the day when people actually used to allow you to put resumes online and do stuff where you could get a job, right? The MasterCard came a job, and I wanted to stay in this particular part of my industry now because I thought that's where the world was going, which was, how we look at digital finance and all this sort of stuff. And I was kind of part of that journey in the very beginning. So there was a job in MasterCard to be a product manager. So I got the interview. I can say this now. I'd never done product management in my life. They don't know that. They do now. But I got the job only because I was doing bits of product in the innovation lab in Nationwide.
Right.
And I could talk about the stuff I'd done that they wanted me to work on. So anyway, I got the job. It was like being an entrepreneur because there was a very small team. They'd hired all these 3 product managers, me being one of them, to build some of these first products that the business had never done before. So, and then I got given a team with a guy in the US of 52 engineers in Moldova. And there's also a piece of the puzzle I didn't mention actually. After JP Morgan in that sort of hiatus, I also became an advisor / partner of a service design agency, which is one of the world's first after IDO. And it taught me the power of designing for people.
Yeah.
So then when I went back into the business world, I became a bit dangerous because I could design from the outside looking in. Whereas most businesses design from the inside. It's a bit like Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs designed for the user in mind. And that's what I learned. And it was beaten out of me in terms of how I used to think. So when I got the job in MasterCard, then by the time I got to MasterCard, and there was another reason I took that job. I remember going to a workshop where a lady was speaking, and she was describing leaders and CEOs. I was like, my God, like I'm on a leadership journey. Because I'd done sales, I'd done marketing, I'd done change management, I've done all of these things. And the only thing missing off my CV was launching a product. Oh, MasterCard launching a product. Let's do this. And that's what I did. And in 5 months, we took a PowerPoint presentation to a piece of infrastructure that I'm told 80% of those digital finance payments in the UK go through that platform that we built. I purposely, by the way, flew to Moldova and met my team of 52 people and booked a hotel and brought them all together in a room and made them realize what they were building. And I made them realize we weren't building a product. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, we're building a platform that could change people's lives. And I said, look, if a fintech or somebody uses our platform and it gives them access to services they previously couldn't, they could end up building something that could change someone's life, all because of our software and what we enabled them to do. So please don't think you're building a product. You're building something that could benefit everybody. And they just bought into it. They got sucked into it. And then I used all those design skills then to show them how they all fitted part into the journey of building. We built it in 6 months. We changed the way the company thought about software delivery. And of course, then we sold it to some of the biggest retailers in the UK, some of the biggest banks, all those things. And then they decided to tell me, okay, now can you just do normal releases? And of course, I got bored at that point because the real excitement for me was building the damn thing, right?
Right.
And then I got picked up by, thankfully, to work in MasterCard's what would be their front-facing innovation arm, which is helping our customers innovate at the time. So I was, I guess, head of new product but also CIO, looking after technology. I turned permanent in between all of this, by the way, because I always thought, well, I can't be a CEO as a contractor, so I became permanent. And then there was the which is where the book piece comes into this story then, which is, and I'll stop there because I think you probably want to dig into that crossroads actually.
So can we back up just a bit?
Yeah,
so can you talk about Moldova for a second? What was it that made you decide that you were going to go there, bring them all to a hotel, and then have a conversation with them about what they were building?
So Moldova was kind of thrown on me.
Okay.
So I remember getting like a really random call before I joined. A dear friend, he said to me, one of the project managers, he said, "Bit strange, but how do you fancy? Would you be all right going to Moldova in your first week of the job? Because that's where your team is." I was like, okay, fine. Because they were a third-party company. So, and I was kind of inspired by the Apples of this world, the original Apple structure, right? Where they made people believe they were building something bigger than themselves. And I thought, well, how can I build a team ethos with 52 people from a different culture that don't know me, and a culture that respects people who are technical, particularly in this field, right? So I thought, well, I need them to buy into a story. Again, the power of storytelling, right? And I need them to believe the myth. So I insisted on this. I said, look, I'm not coming here to build a product and a piece of tin. I want to win their hearts and minds and want them to run through brick walls for me. So I had to meet them at a human level and get to know them as people, and also give them a story that they would all believe in. And I wanted them to come to work every day because they believed in the story. And at the same time, I also wanted to believe them to believe that my job was also to make them successful. Because if the story is successful, so are they.
Absolutely.
And that was really the narrative I wanted to leave them with, is, look, this is not for me, this is for you. And you will all get something out of this. And hopefully, and I remember when we implemented the software in GMAC, in General Motors, I ended up working with the developers and we did it. And we stayed friends ever since, because we said to each other that no one will take this away from us, this experience. This is the journey that we all went through. And that was actually the message I left with them, is like, when you're done and you look back in 20 years of your life and we deliver something of impact, that's a story that no one will ever take away from you. And that was almost the story I left them with. It was like, I wanted to give them something that they could believe in and want to come to work for, because it almost then became bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden then we just built a culture. And so again, I learned something new. I learned how to build a culture and a narrative. And ironically, a year later, someone said to me that, you are the poster of what a product manager actually is. I didn't have the heart to tell them. I didn't have a clue what it was when I joined. I just created this thing based on, because I was excited, because the product manager job was basically, I was the CEO of my own product. So basically every job I'd ever done was rolled up into this job. I guess it's great. This all made sense now. This is how this all rolled out.
Yeah.
But in the end, the art of product is not actually building product. It's selling really good stories.
Yeah.
And that people will believe in, and bringing people on a journey. I've met so many product managers who think the job is technical. They think the job is managing a spreadsheet, or it's not. It's about, can you define a story and build a narrative that would want people to invest in what you've built?
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And it was never really about the technology. It was never, because let's be frank, when we deployed that into the country I was working in, we were miles behind the market. But all my customers brought the story I was telling and the vision, not the product, really.
So there's a recurring theme here.
Yeah.
So GMAC, you go meet the customers first, then you meet the team, right? Now you're going and meeting with the team, but you're basically putting the customer first. So you're right. And so that's everything that you're doing throughout your career. And it's quite a career, right? It's all people based.
Yeah.
In one way or another, it's all people based.
Yeah.
The product itself is the product, but you're always focused on how does that product impact people, and how can we better take care of the customer, right? And that's where people get inspired. People get inspired because you have the ability to go in and figure out, and it's like earlier you were in a job where your boss went in and said, "How's your business?" Right? "How's everything going? Talk to me." You're on all of a sudden you're on the factory floor. Now you're walking the place and you're right in there telling you the story. That's exactly what we do here, because we're all about people. We're all about their story. We're all about what's happening with them, right?
Yep.
It's a recurring theme. So you're with MasterCard, and you had shared with me privately that you had written a report.
Yeah.
And that report was sent, and there was some pushback from it. Sort of some, some people sort of feeling like it didn't quite resonate with them. They didn't quite identify with it. Can you talk about that for a second? Number one, why did you write it? Number two, how did that feedback impact you?
So
and what was the subject of the paper?
Yeah. So I think it's worth noting what that moment in time was.
Yes, let's do that.
So a few years ago, a very famous man decided to change his company name to Meta. Right? And it's around the whole metaverse time period. At the time in MasterCard, ironically, we've been talking about this for a long time. And suddenly Facebook legitimized it for us. We weren't the crazy people that were talking about stuff that people wouldn't believe in. So I was also being kind of sidebar recruited into another part of the business and innovation more formally. I was asked to write a paper on the future of data until 2030, but more so its impact when our virtual world and our physical world start to merge.
Right.
What does that mean? Right.
Yeah.
What does that future look like, and what does it mean for us? So me being me, I like, okay, sounds good. Didn't really, understand the brevity of what I was taking on, but I got sucked into it. It just was never ending. And I was like spotting patterns. I was seeing things that people couldn't see. I was connecting dots. I was talking about AI agents like 3-4 years ago. Like I was literally writing about stuff that no one had talked about at the time, and connected in a way. yeah, and also I gave them a roadmap and everything around what MasterCard would do and so on. Anyway, my boss at the time, he was amazingly supportive, and he allowed me to speak about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like my first route into public speaking, and audiences just fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the messaging wasn't grounded. I'm sure to a lot of people it was a bit like a fire hose. And their faces were pretty shocked about how much I was regurgitating, because I had no structure to this damn thing. It was just, even in my brain, it wasn't fully formed.
Right.
But the messaging was landing. And in a way, I wasn't that bothered in the end that it didn't resonate with the team I was going into, because I was getting more notoriety outside of the business, because now leaders wanted to hear me speak and wanted to hear what I had to say and valued my opinion because of the breadth of industry experience that I had. And I could tell them what the impact of this technology was going to be on their business 4 years ago. And I could tell them what it would mean for the customer of today and tomorrow, and put the human in the middle. And at the same time, tell them how to shape their business.
Yeah.
So in the end, it was never given to me as a title, but I ended up advising C-suite and central banks around the world on the future of money, the future of technology and data, and AI as it was back then. But in writing that paper, there was a moment which I haven't had before, which was a moment that this is my job. Mm-hmm. I'm actually writing my career in front of me, mm-hmm. or I'm writing something that's important. And the hair stood up on my arm when I was doing it. And in a way, I wasn't bothered they didn't get it, because actually I could see something else much bigger than even I was. And it was a start of a journey of 18 months, 2 years of flying around the world and moving to a different country and changing my life almost. And then the book came off the back of that, really.
So you did this, you went out and you spoke, and you had feedback. Can you talk a little bit about that feedback and why you feel like it resonated with so many people?
So I think you said this when we first met. I think people were buying into me, not really the topic. Mm-hmm. So it was almost like the passion I had for this thing, and underpinned by real world experience. Mm-hmm. They were hooked, right? And I even had speaking agents wanting me to come and speak at events around the world. And like I was speaking to some of the, I got flown to London to meet, the finance director of a famous airline for 30 minutes. And he said to me, like, no one's ever spoken to me about AI this way before. Mm-hmm. And I was walked over the road then to meet a head of telco of Nigeria, and apparently I saved the account because of me. Mm-hmm. So the common denominator in all of this was me. It wasn't really the topic. I could be talking about onions, I guess, and people would have bought it. Mm-hmm. Because they were believing in how much I was passionate about the topic and how much I believed wholeheartedly in why this was important at a human level as well as a business level. And I was connecting the dots, and I was answering questions they probably hadn't even thought of asking me. And that became the common denominator. It was almost like the passion for the topic that I became the topic in the end. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a PowerPoint anymore. I became the topic.
That's where when we were talking before, I think that's where people disconnect. Okay. Yeah. Because it's a PowerPoint. The PowerPoint has the slides, and they're reading off what's on the PowerPoint, and they're reading off the slides, and everything has to be this technical deal. And yes, there's technology involved. And when we're talking about artificial intelligence, it's one of the most complicated things in the world. But what's interesting about your situation, and now that we have your story, right? It all comes back to the consumer. It all comes back to the end user. And that's the thing that you get that most people don't. yes, it's a complicated subject. Yes, it's something that's highly technical. And we can talk about the technology until the cows come home. We could be here 3 days, right? The thing is, it's about how it impacts the end user. And I believe, from what I told you before when we talked, this is the hook, right? This is the thing that grabs people and it captures their imagination. When you start telling me from a PowerPoint presentation all this technical jargon, right? I don't need to know how it's made. I just need to know how it's going to impact, and specifically how it's going to impact me, right? That's the thing that you get that so many people in this space don't. And that's one of the reasons why I was so unbelievably excited to have you on and to talk about this book that you wrote, but specifically about the subject that you wrote about, right?
Yeah.
This is something that I feel like is sort of a watershed moment, because I want people to understand that it's about human connection. So, like, one of the things that we talked about when we talked last before this was we're more technologically connected right now than we've ever been, right? You and I are having a face-to-face conversation and you're on another side of the world from me. Okay? And well, you're on the other side of the world, right? Or are you
Yeah.
on the West Coast?
Yeah, I'm in Dubai. So yeah.
Oh, you're okay. Yeah, because you said you were coming back to Los Angeles. So, right? So you're in Dubai and you and I are talking like we're sitting in the same room. What's interesting though is people feel more disconnected than they ever have.
Correct.
And that's why the way you do this grabs people and captures them. Okay? Because you're connecting with them on a deeper level than anybody else has. It's kind of like you're the next Tony Robbins to an extent, like your friend told you, right? Well, it's like that though, because Tony has his own niche, right? Tony has his own thing that he teaches and that he inspires and he motivates. You have something that, let's be honest, is an onion that hasn't been peeled. And this is something where you have this platform and this knowledge and this opportunity to, for lack of a better term, change the world. And I'm not trying to be corny here. I'm saying this is something that has an impact. And I believe is having an impact even as we speak. Like when we first got started before we hit record, you said it's taking on a life of its own. I'm not the least bit surprised by that. Neither is Mark Victor Hansen, by the way, or Crystal Dwyer Hansen. They're not the least bit surprised. Okay. So you write this paper.
Yeah.
You write this paper and you receive some feedback on it. Okay. And you ended up traveling, for lack of a better term, kind of around the world talking about this. And what you found out was you were grabbing people, okay, and capturing their imagination. At some point, you make the decision to write a book.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy commitment, right? Like you were talking before we hit record that now that you've written the book, you're kind of like, okay, what now, right? Yeah. Well, now you go to the world and you tell them about it, which is what we're doing here, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to do that with Mark Victor Hansen in a little bit. So can you talk about the mindset, sort of how this developed? Because not every day do people decide to write a book, number one. Number two, write it like The Alchemist, right? As a fable. Yeah. Walk us through that for a second.
Oh, so this is a 3-year journey. This is a 3-year journey, which I'm going to condense for you.
Yeah.
So I would say like the first 2 years of those 3 were R&D.
Yeah.
It's me, every time I would write about something, I'd have a problem to solve. And it's a problem to solve that no one had figured out.
Yeah.
So I had to figure it out. So I'll give you some examples, right? Just to bring it to life for people.
Yeah.
So big part of the story is how do we turn data into a real world asset that we can own and appreciate and treat it as our cultural asset, not just something we monetize, which of course we will, but something we have the right to use and create and generate. Now, everybody talks about data ownership, and in the book dispels that myth because no one really owns it. But you can own the insight that you create off that data, right?
Right.
But the big question then is, okay, cool. Then I was left in this quandary that, well, if people do own the insight, can people read it? Do they have the data literacy skills today to do it? That then forced me to look at the education system. And then I went down a whole other rabbit hole and realized, okay, that hasn't really changed since the industrial age. But then once you joined all the dots, the real statement that stuck with me was, we've never reached our human potential. That was the real aha moment for me. And it was like, I've got all of this technology, but not one of us has a single view of our health. I have all of this amazing artificial intelligence, but only half the world has access. And AI is only giving me a small percentage of the picture. And it only knows who I was yesterday. And most of people the age of 15 don't know who Nelson Mandela is. So I'm kind of, but at the same time, I'm having to solve problems. Okay, if I'm going to move data around, how do I do that in a secure way? How do people share data? Or I know licensing agreements, that'll solve that. Okay, I'll use that piece of technology, I'll use this. So by the time I'd written the new school's curriculum for children up until the age of 23, I'd rebadged AI into some form of collaborative intelligence, which is less scary and really speaks to the fact that it's going to take the best of both of us, not just the machine. So you can imagine you're figuring out all of this stuff, and then you read it back and you go, I hate it. Because it's everything I didn't want it to be. It was a management consulting book, right?
Right.
And then human in here, it was just me trying to sound academic, which I'm clearly never. So then it was
too technical.
It's too technical, right?
Right.
And
it's not
too many people.
Yeah, it's not grabbing people, right?
Half the book was the why and the what, and then suddenly I jumped into the how. So I've now left half the world behind, and I'm speaking to only the regulator in the room on their own, and they don't care either.
Right.
So two things were said to me on this journey, which stuck with me, which changed the life of what I wrote. The first is, someone said to me, the world remembers stories. Okay, tick. And then someone said, people remember the one, which means they remember a name. They don't necessarily know where it comes from, but they remember a name. So then I started thinking about all the books I loved as a kid, everything I loved as I read. And The Alchemist stuck with me because it was a hero's journey. And it became our journey in a weird way. And what I realized is the world probably needed another story to believe in and another hero to root for. So that's where the hero of the book was born. And in a way, he almost became a metaphor and a symbol for all of us. And I found a way of weaving incredibly complex facts into a story, but I had to put my own spin on it.
Yes.
So I joke, it's a bit like you got Blade Runner and The Alchemist, and all merged together, but it became a way of telling the story. And at the end of it, hopefully people, the last line in the book is, I'm here to make the world dream again. And as part of the narrative is like, can we actually help people reach their full potential again? Do we use this moment? And the reason the book is called Our Moment, by the way, there was many titles, all of them awful, but the Our Moment stuck with me because it was almost like we may never get this again. AI is almost like a catalyst, like a mirror. It's showing us all our mistakes and all the things that we should have identified years ago and resolved. The way we teach our children, the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about technology. It should be an enabler, not a driver. The way we think about our data, we think of it as a transaction. We don't think of it as stories and memories and experiences. So at the same time, I had to show people a story of technology they'd never heard before, and some of the mistakes we made and some of the gaps and some of the things that, if chosen a different path, the world could be very different today. But treating this as a moment, as a crossroads, and giving the reader a hero to root for, that they could see themselves in and see his development, but also see that there is a possible light at the end of the tunnel for AI. And AI isn't a bad thing, by the way. I think it's a great thing. But if you look at it as a catalyst for changing the direction of how we want it to be, because I guarantee in 4 years' time, you and I can probably be having a discussion about another piece of technology. But the irony is we have an opportunity right now to look at this technology and reshape the way we want it to go, but also it will shape whatever follows it. Because that's why this is such a powerful moment, because we have the opportunity to reshift the direction of it for the sake of our potential and generations that follow. Because I would argue even the Elon Musks in this world have never reached their potential, because there's elements of their life that they probably haven't done in the way they would like, because everything comes back to the way that we're taught. You know, the way we're taught today is to get a job, not necessarily to be fluid and adaptable as people. Because if we were, then we wouldn't be worried right now, because we'd all be fluid enough to figure out what to do next.
Right.
But the trouble is, the first thing you're asked as a kid is, what do you want to do when you grow up? Which is a very posh way to say, how are you going to contribute to the economy?
Right.
When reality is, you're not taught the abilities that you need to even use artificial intelligence today, because most people don't even know what's real and what's not. That's not because they're stupid. It's because they weren't taught those foundational abilities of critical thinking, reasoning, debating, all these things at a very young age. And then suddenly we're going to give them artificial intelligence when they're 12 or something like that, and hope everything is going to work out okay, when we know that's not the case. And that's why this is a great moment to peel back the layers and almost put the handbrake on and say, right, this is the most amazing technology we've ever had. How do we use it in such a way that allows everybody to reach a potential that none of us have ever reached? And that's why I think this is such a powerful moment, which needed a powerful story. It needed the facts, of course, because it legitimizes it. But at the same time, it needed a name to remember, and it needed a story that hopefully people will recognize, and even ask them to question things that they've never thought about, because they've never been told it themselves.
So before we get into the book, I have a question for you. Why do you think people remember stories?
Because it's ingrained in us, right? Like when I talked about the history of technology in the book, the biggest aha moment for me was when we talk about data and identity and relationship. Well, that was a cave painting, right? Because on that cave wall was a picture of us, which you could argue is a piece of data. It was our identity, which is who we were and who we are, and it was relationship. So, and the way you could even argue, if you really want to be philosophical, the whole world really is built on stories, because none of us were there to prove that any of these things happened. It's just a story, and we either choose to believe the story or we don't.
Right.
Most of us believe the stories because it's something that's ingrained in us that's been handed down from generation to generation.
So they've actually done brain scans. And what's interesting is, if somebody's talking to you and you're listening, there's two little parts of your brain that are engaged. The rest of it's just sitting there. Two tiny little, right? But when somebody tells you a story, every lobe in your brain lights up, and every lobe in their brain lights up. The storyteller and the listener. Fascinating, huh?
It is, and
we're literally programmed to connect with stories.
And in a way, when people read the first two chapters, they're hooked. Because I wrote the story in a way that you feel it, you can smell it, you feel like you're there. So I applied cinematography writing style to the Alchemist tone, but the key is you feel like you're there. And it was a way I had to make people feel it, and the way to do that was through real, almost like all those stories I read when I was younger, all those, like I used to read classical books by Thomas Hardy, and I used to they were so vivid that I could imagine what the field was like when it was raining outside when I was young. And I wanted to capture that element of the reader feeling it, and that emotion and those connections, and that's what made it so powerful. And I think you're right, and we are programmed to remember stories, and the whole world is built on them. There's very little fact.
Totally agree.
Okay. There's very little fact.
So the title of the book is Our Moment. The prologue is the flicker before the flame. Can you talk about that for a second?
So there are some funny chapters in the book, and I remember listening to songwriters who can't explain how they write stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They just pull it from the air,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just written really quickly. Like that was something that was written in 30 minutes. The very last chapter I wrote off the back of a dream my publisher had, and she called me and said, can't explain this. And I just ran with it and just took it somewhere else. And it was done in like 20, 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write an opening chapter that would make the reader want to read the book all the way through. And we even said, me and the creative editor, that if I write it in such a way, they might even just jump to the end. Mm. So it was like my way of hooking you in the beginning. And it was a way of saying to you that the character you're about to read, maybe there's part of you in him too.
Mm-hmm. It worked.
And this is the moment before the flame and the flicker, before a job was lost, another song disappears, mm-hmm. another voice is silenced. And just maybe at the end, when you reach the end of the book, you'll understand where this is our moment. And it was almost like a dream of writing that, and in a philosophical way that hopefully would touch someone to like want them to keep reading and understand who this character is and the journey he's going through. So
part one is visioning, an idea and a belief. Can you talk about that for a second?
So I had to give him a loss and a tragedy. Because every hero needs a reason for being. Mm-hmm. In every movie you ever watch, there's always it's like a set, right? Mm-hmm. In movies. And I had to give him a tragedy. So he had to experience loss. But he had to dream. Mm-hmm. And he had to dream of a world that could be, but also a world that might be. So he sees both sides of the coin. And then he has to have a vehicle then to get him on the journey. So I had to give him an item that I don't know if people realize, like he's the only one that can see what's in the item in the book, right? But in a way, this discovers him. And this is the vehicle then that allows him he has his vision, he finds his compass, if you like, and then he meets the right people along the way to help him unravel it, but at the same time, evolve him. Because really, this is a bit like The Alchemist, right? This story is in all of us, really. But it just needed to be unlocked. And he found a way to unlock it. And as time progresses, he realizes the answer. But then the answer is in all of us, really. I use a line from the book: the real revolution in all of us isn't technology, it's humanity. Mm-hmm. That's the real innovation in all of us. And that's what he learns. And he learns a different way of doing things, which addresses the things that we should have done decades ago, mm-hmm. but in a way that touches him and hopefully. And the big message in this book for him as the character, he believes the dream is about fixing the tragedy that happened to him, where he realizes the dream is actually for all of us. Mm-hmm. And as a hero, he's actually fighting for all of us. And that dream wasn't for him. He was just the person carrying it.
So part two, discovering the untold story. Talk about that for a second.
So this is the story. So in the research, I had to go back. I went all the way back to caves until a moment in time, because clearly you couldn't cover everything. But that was to expose to him and the reader the story of technology that we haven't heard. Mm-hmm. So how we got here, and some of the opportunities that we had to take a different path with the technology. And by the way, this is no blame on anybody, because this is a bit like the suitcase that every generation carries from the past and doesn't know any different. Mm-hmm. So this is not me blaming big tech or blaming any other institution, because in a way they were handed some luggage from some invisible person from 20 years ago, and they don't know any different either. Mm-hmm. And they just carry on in their own merry way because that's the way they know.
The way it's always been done.
Always done, right? But unknown to them, sliding doors moments, if we'd have done things slightly differently, the way we even look at AI would be very different today.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that was a choice. So that's what the reader discovers.
Yeah.
The reader discovers some of these things they don't know and opens their eyes to things that they probably hadn't thought about.
So part 3, realizing the dots and patterns.
So this is just him again. I'm stealing from a very famous person who's no longer with us, but he starts to join the dots,
Mm-hmm.
and he starts to realize there is a theme here, and there is a common denominator, and it's that common denominator that became more invisible as time progressed. In fact, we became even more invisible.
Yeah.
So he now starts to realize what those patterns are, in a way.
Part 4, the future we build together.
So this was kind of the belief.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to give him. So in the book, people will notice that his character, and this was a big learning curve for me, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine I've gone from management consulting writing now to world building, character arcs, distinct character voices. Like I was building a movie scene in a way. Yeah. Big learning curve for me. Mm-hmm. So I had to evolve him. So once he believes and he sees the patterns, then he can then start shaping what the future can be, which effectively is that part of the book.
So part 5, a new beginning.
So this is him.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, this is quite cool though, because this is him. In the book, I had to also create a bad guy. Every story has a villain.
Mm-hmm.
So the reader will start to realize the villain is also a metaphor for all of us, our past and our present, and what the future could be. So once he's faced off to that individual, then he can start telling the world of what the new beginning can be. Mm-hmm. And there is a bonus chapter in the end, which is the one that we plucked from the sky, like in the middle of the night. I wrote that in about 20 minutes. Don't ask me how. But it's where the boy becomes a man. Mm-hmm. And it's inspired by, like, the whole book, quite frankly, is inspired by all of my favorite movies. Mm-hmm. And scenes from all my favorite movies. Every character in the book is a character from my favorite movies, sprinkled in with a little bit of dust to give them a distinct voice. But I felt that those characters elevated those individuals I was trying to, or at least those archetypes helped elevate.
So now that the book is finished and you're going to work telling the world about the book, hindsight being 2020, when you look back at writing the book, what's your favorite thing about the book?
Wow, that's such a great question. There's a few things, actually. The first is it taught me to take my ego out of the writing. Yeah. The favorite part of the book is I became the storyteller. And the book became not about me. Mm-hmm. The first version was all about me and how clever I was. Mm-hmm. This version, I became the storyteller. And my favorite part of the book was that actually I exited and I let the characters tell the story for me. That was my favorite part of the book, actually. And the second part is how invested I became in the characters. Mm-hmm. And they end up having a life of their own. My favorite chapters in the book actually are chapter 2, where he finds the book and that conversation. And the bonus chapter are my favorite, because they build the essence of who he is and what can become. And chapter 2 is my favorite because it questions something that's probably in all of us, where the failure to act, right? We're all given opportunities every day in our life, but not all of us take them. And he questions himself, and he does it quite a lot in the book. This was the first time he's like, well, what if I don't do anything? What if it isn't me? And I'm sure we all have those doubts. And I think in a way he was demonstrating my own doubt in the writing. But no, I think letting go of my ego and some of those famous chapters and the way that I wrote it were my famous. We spoke in the very beginning. I was devastated when it ended because it was a void, and I became so invested in them in a weird way. For the first time, I had an appreciation for the man who wrote The Alchemist, because Mark Victor Hansen wants me to write many more, but in a way, a bit like The Alchemist, he never wrote another one like The Alchemist, because it was a moment in time and how he felt. And I felt exactly the same in writing this. It was like a moment in time. It's like when the world needed it most, the book was written. It's like The Alchemist. When the world needed to believe again, The Alchemist was written. And that's what I hope for this book, in a way.
This was humbling.
Very much. Very much. I look at it as a closure on all of that story I told you.
Yeah.
Now is the beginning of what comes next.
Yeah, it's all full circle, right? It's crazy.
Completely full circle. It's told in a story. I was taught stories. It's done from what humans can be, and the human was in all of it. And every job I've ever done enabled me to solve all of these problems. And the book then just became the mic drop, closure moment, and then the door to whatever comes next. And realistically, the Mark's going to ask me this after this call. Who is the book written for? And in a way, it's written for all of us. It's for those who don't know any different. It's those who think the world is moving too fast. And it's also for those who can make change. And that's ultimately who it was all for. And it just needed a real story for them all to buy into. And then my job now as the storyteller is to give the story away, but at the same time help those who can make change and almost become a bridge between them.
So if somebody's listening to this and they want to buy the book, it's Our Moment. Where can they find it?
Surprisingly everywhere. Don't search your name. It's like you'd be surprised what comes up. I was just curious, like, where is this book? So you can get it US, you can get it in Barnes & Noble, you can get it on Amazon US. It has gone as far as Taiwan, I believe. Wow. I've seen it on some stores there. So it's all, my hope is just go into your local bookshop and demand it. Yeah. Because that's the way it gets stocked.
Absolutely.
Right now it's an online purchase only, across all online resellers, even eBay apparently, which is amazing. But no, please go into your bookstore and demand it, and ask for it, because that's how it gets into everybody's hands in the store as well.
So the title of the book is Our Moment.
It is.
You're Michael Clark. If anybody's listening to this and they read the book and they want to have you come in and speak, how can they reach out to you?
So we're busily doing the website now. So there will be a michaelclark.ai website, which is busily being finished. So that should be finished in the next couple of days or so. There is also an Our Moment website, which is called ourmoment.ai. There is a movie trailer that you can find on there, which we had done, like a 30-second trailer.
Really cool, by the way.
Yeah, I wanted to, by the way, that trailer the writing was inspired by Gladiator. And the only premise I had was no one was allowed to see his face. Yeah. Because I wanted him to be a symbol, right? So no one's allowed to see his face. Yeah. But yeah, so there was just a trailer on there. I do plan to publish more from the original manuscript as insight pieces and papers for people to read. So they will be coming in the next few weeks as well, or next weeks and months. We're planning to do podcast and various other bits and pieces, and I'm slowly starting to release, maybe do some readings as well from bits of the book and various other aspects as well. So the website will be a holding zone for all of that, hopefully up and running in the next week or so. And
then people can also find you on LinkedIn, right? Because I'm actually connected with you on LinkedIn.
So we're expanding out into TikTok as well.
Yeah.
There is an emerging Our Moment TikTok, because the reason for TikTok in a way is also to reach that next generation.
Yeah.
So that, I'm not going to be dancing, but you'll learn stuff about the book on there. I'm told in the next 4 to 5 months there'll also be an Audible.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be the one narrating it because I feel like I have to.
You really do.
Yeah. So it'll be me. We'll do the Audible in about 4 to 5 months' time, and hopefully that will reach an audience because I know what it's like. Like I say, I read 30 books a year, but I stopped reading when I was writing a book, which killed my whole reading because I didn't want to lose my voice, my writing voice. But also a lot of that's Audible because I do know people listen to it in the gym and they do podcasts. So there will be an Audible. Yeah, you're the same as me. So there will be an Audible in about 4 to 5 months' time.
I listened to a bunch of them. I was just listening to one this morning.
Yeah.
I can't wait for yours to come out. It's going to be really, really cool to listen to. And I love the fact, absolutely love the fact that you're doing the narrating. That is a big, big deal to me. When authors don't do that, when they go and hire somebody, it's just not the same.
No, it really isn't. It really isn't. I remember listening to whose books did I listen to? Simon Sinek is one that narrates his own.
Yeah, love that
it's
guy.
Just such a big deal, right? Because at the end of the day, these were his thoughts.
Yeah.
It just never resonates because you don't get the passion from the writer.
Exactly.
You lose the essence of the story because story is more powerful when the person who wrote it is telling you it. I also think it's quite nice, and I'd love to do it in the Audible. I'm going to talk about it with Mark now, not to plug it after this, but it's also important to understand how the story evolved, how those characters came about. Because I often describe this book as almost like the precursor to the Matrix.
Yeah.
Almost like this is the world before it happened.
Right.
And there's so many little nuances in there that you don't often get to share. And I think that's what I'd like to do the Audible a little bit differently. Yeah. I'd like to do the story of the book, obviously, because that's what people are paying for. But I'd like to also put some stuff in there which gives them a backstory of how some of these characters were created, why they were created, and what the story narrative is really, to give them something back as well. So there'll be more there than just me narrating the book.
You got to do that. You got to do that. Michael Clark, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been an amazing experience. I knew for a fact it would be, and I was totally looking forward to this. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you for having me. It was an amazing experience. It's always fun to look back as well as forward. So really appreciate it.
Thank you, bud. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.